We are back again to that fun box of wonder, the art of siege. And this is Lille. This is probably the most beautiful map in the set. And if you look kind of carefully, you'll notice, hey, wait, there's no hexes. Wow, there's like a point-to-point movement system here, but there's nothing over here. Wow, this is weird. Yeah, this is very weird. And, given the year it came out, this may be the first point-to-point movement system, actually. Well, you know, games like Conquest and stuff had things like this. These kind of almost checkerboard grids of points that you can operate in. So, it doesn't feel like later point-to-point systems, but this is used to represent the defenses on the actual bastions and the walls of this city of Lille. Lille is, at this point, maybe Europe's greatest fortress. We're in the midst of the War of Spanish Succession here. And Marlborough has just defeated, I think it's at Oudenarde. Is it Vendôme? I think it's Vendôme. Vendôme, Villars, they all kind of blur together, all those French V names. Speaking of which, I really have to get to these suckers because after this comes, the next year comes Oudenarde, actually, with the main participants here. On the Allied side, you of course have Marlborough, Prince Eugen. Try to pronounce it right. Yeah, I don't pronounce anything else right. Why not? And the Prince of Orange. On the French side, off map somewhere, not recorded in the game, you have Vendôme, who might come out and do a little demonstration. But you also have Marshal Boufflers, who will hand Marlborough the closest thing to a defeat that anybody manages on. And here he's really he's run to Lille, the place that the Allies certainly would not attack because it's the strongest fortress. They have basically three choices, Mons being the most likely. Lille is almost seen as, nah, that's impossible. Well, Lille is under strength, actually. And Marlborough's choice to attack this, Marlborough, who, in a 3W magazine, actually, I think it was 3W, in a Wargamer magazine about his games, containing a game about Marlborough, the campaigns of Marlborough, which is a nice European side of the War of Spanish Succession. Well, Franco-German border of the War of Spanish Succession, whereas No Peace Without Spain kind of covers the whole of Europe. Where am I lost here? Yeah, Campaigns of Marlborough quotes him as perhaps the only general who, of any significance, who never lost a battle and never invested a city with a siege that he didn't eventually take. And, you know, a siege is guaranteed to work, basically, if nobody intervenes. If you do invest a siege, possibility of bad weather could get in the way, but you could tough that out through a winter siege. This, like most of this Art of Siege games, is a time-limited thing. There's no great, yeah, Marlborough would lose the siege, give up the siege if that time has passed. There's no real reason for that, except, hey, you know, you want to get this done early. Now, done early is not early enough to help, actually. And in this case, you're not going to change history either. You're not going to be able to get an assault off in time to be able to conduct a campaign into France, which is what Marlborough wanted to do. He was talked out of the siege. There is a really excellent historical write-up in this one, better than in I think any of the others. And just to me, this one is the biggest work of love in the series, in a sense. The work on the map, the historical documents, documentary, etc. Unfortunately, although it's got a very interesting system, and you can see some of the parallels are drawn on the map, those don't mean anything. They're just there for flavor. You'll be building your own parallels with these. Weird game. And you'll see the same system, I think, implemented better in Sevastopol. This one maybe has a little bit too much chrome in it, as it were. And it may kind of bog the game down a little bit. Or it may just be that, shit, you know, I always hit this one first and it makes it harder to understand the concepts, and this is the more complicated game. I should do Sevastopol first. Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's go through what we have. First of all, well, we have this map. And the Allied start lines are where the Allied armies are already in place. They're going to begin digging from those to approach the city with their parallel lines in order to get close enough to assault it. But also, as they're approaching, they want to do some bombardment and hit the walls of the city. Now, historically, they unleash this tremendous bombardment when they first get their ammo here, and this is a terrible idea, and then said, well, we can't really assault the city at that point. And then had to wait until they got closer in order to unleash their later bombardment. The particulars of this game are such that you're able to fire rapidly enough that ammunition supply is your limiting factor, which means you don't want to spend it. It's not like the other siege games where you're just rolling dice, breaking the walls, watching the walls tumble down, watching the enemy repair them, and trying to get to a point where you've broken the walls down enough. Instead, you've got a classic Vauban siege. The city was actually, the fortifications were Vauban's crowning achievement, supposedly. And his own nephew is here to help in the defense as an engineer. But Marlborough and the Allies have, and everybody basically, have taken Vauban's ideas for how to conduct a siege on the offensive, as well as how the French are defending a city actually built by him. Well, the walls actually built by him. Or modified. And you know, you notice all the beautiful stuff. Most of this doesn't come into play, but the way you know, the bastions stick out. This is very not a medieval city anymore. This is an Age of Reason city where you're trying to get firing lanes so that if an attack's made on a point, other points, bastions can support it. And these places are just hellish fire zones that you kind of don't want to enter, because you can get crossfire coming at you from all directions. Okay. I guess we'll go through the sequence of play. So, like the other games in the Siege series, you have a planning phase where you decide whether or not you're going to assault, among other things, and we'll go over everything there. And then you have an optional assault phase. Now, within the planning, well, actually, you have a pre-assault and a post-assault, and then the assault inside if it happens. Okay. The pre-assault involves planning, where the French may have an attempt to intervene in Lille. This is Vendôme. Oh, I don't remember when that happened, so we're going to have to kind of look through. We're going to be going through the rules in more detail in a little bit. Then there's a possibility to get replacement units back on the board. Units that are destroyed, basically, you're able to replenish them as they recover in the hospitals or whatever. Then you have an attrition game turn, which we have a few of these towards the end, where you're going to suffer additional losses, indicating the bad weather coming. Okay. Then you determine artillery supply, and that's just a fixed thing for the most part, with one exception. September 23rd to 28th, the Chevalier de Luxembourg whom I played in a LARP, or at least somebody who bemusedly thought himself that. Very weird character, but anyway, he sort of leads a column of ammunition supplies and troops through Allied lines into the city. And that's represented in here. Like I said, a lot of chrome in this game. Then both players are allowed to fire their siege artillery. And both sides have it here. The Allies, their goal is to soften the walls up. And we have our normal little breach damage markers, etc. Except they only go up to 3 here. The walls start at 4 strength points, and you mark them as they're damaged. Once they get down to 0, they'll be destroyed. No tunneling by the English. Tunneling by the French, though. That's handled in a kind of silly way, though, I think. Anyway, basically, after you collect your supply, you're allowed to start using it and fire your weapons off. And you're going to fire them using this little range detector. The siege guns go out to 700 meters. And essentially, you just measure with that to see. So here, well, I don't know where my 0 is. I think it's the tip of the counter. So I could go from the Allied start line and say, well, I can't reach there. But if I go from this tiny tip here, I still can't reach the bastion. That's only an assault area. From here, I could shoot into this range. And you've got penalties for firing at long range marked across it. Some of the guns, the mortars, have shorter range. And what? We have also field artillery, which also has a shorter range. And that's used during the assault phases. After that, we go through a construction phase where the Allies are going to generate points. The cavalry is out in this foraging box. Every 3 cav units gets you a point to construct stuff with. And you're going to be building these transverses to bring you out. And parallels coming off of them. And working your way slowly towards the actual city walls. We'll get to how you actually do that in a moment. Or a few minutes, as the case is more likely. Then the Allies are allowed to do an operational movement within their trench lines to prepare for an assault, perhaps, or just to replenish their guns up towards the front. If an assault was chosen, the Ally makes a check to see how many troops he actually gets to send forward. And then he tactically moves them, again using this measuring stick. I think they move 100 yards at a time. Coming over the top of the trenches and also moving through the trench network to get closer so that they can reach their jumping off point. They're stacking within the trenches, so generally your assault is going to be several rows deep. Then the French get to fire their field artillery, which, let's see if I have one there. I have like a dozen of these interspersed throughout the walls, and those will help retreat or even damage and destroy the infantry units that are attacking. You can't use cav in the assault. Cav are used over here in the foraging box, of course, but they can also be used in these covering boxes. The covering boxes are how the army is defending itself. This is part of the Vauban siege theory. So in the old, like at Acre, you end up having these double lines and you build a wall protecting you from the city you're sieging and defenses for that. And this is actually the Italian style, which was more detailed from that, where you would dig forward with these circumvallance lines. But you'd also have the entrenchments around the rear, and that would be how you defend your army. Well, that stopped working so well. what was found to be more effective was to have a covering army outside the area of the siege itself that could react more effectively, so that the army besieging doesn't just get blockaded by a large army that's actually able to cover a bigger area around it, which could cause all number of problems. All right. Where are we? Okay. Then the French are allowed to move tactically, and basically they're allowed to move amongst these dots. The English will be, or the Allied forces will be allowed to move among those dots. Once they hit one of these black dots, they can assault into the red dots. Hey, what's the goal of the game? The goal of the game is for the Allies to get one of these stars. These are interspersed at important points along the wall on the interior of the city. That's all they need to do. They need to get to one of those and hold it at the end of the assault phase, and they have broken through the walls. They're also allowed to remain in the bastions on the walls between assaults, essentially being able to settle down and defend an area they took. So they could take a chunk of one of these star bastions and hold it against the French and launch their next assault out of the bastion itself. All right. Where do we go next? Then the Allied player is allowed to do melee, and then the French player is allowed to do melee. And I haven't looked at the melee chart, but yeah, this is again one of those, it's voluntary to do melee, and it isn't going to hurt you to do it. But you have to reach at least 1-to-1 odds. Okay, you do 5 impulses of assault, and then once you've done those, the assault's over, somebody's may have won, or you go back to the regular play of the game, at which point the French player gets to rearrange his defenses using operational movement, recovering from the assault. Actually, I think the ally gets to recover from the assault too at that point, but there's a certain level of troops all come back behind the start line, and then they get repositioned as garrisons. Then the French player is allowed to do some engineering to reconstruct damaged wall areas. If the French chose to do a sortie, they will have put units here, and then they get to strike one of the covering boxes, largely, I think, to just kind of mess up the Allied troops that are in the covering box. I don't remember anything significant happening there. We'll see what else can go on there. And then you have the end of a game turn. Again, I've read through these rules again. I've read them several times, but I mean, just recently I read through them once, and it's not all fixed in my mind. There's a lot of neat new concepts in this one compared to the others, which feel more like a traditional hex and counter game, having hexes, for example. Okay. Turns 3 and 8. The French player will make an intervention with Vendôme. Oh, yes, it is. Yeah. No. Turn 3, Vendôme has a chance to intervene, and then he'll leave. Turn 8, you get the Luxembourg attempt. Now, the Vendôme attempt, basically you're going to be rolling on this triple chart, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's going to tell you how many Allied units have to come off the board for how long from the field army to join the field army. And these will be withdrawing from the attack, from the overall siege, and just be sitting out there watching Vendôme. On the Luxembourg attempt, well, what you're going to do is you're going to roll for each unit that comes through. These don't have counters or anything. These are just names. And you have to check to see if the brown man was coming for me. If you roll equal to or less than the suspicion, or equal to or more than the suspicion die roll, you've worried the Allied units that you're trying to pass these troops through. And if you do it again, that unit and everything else coming by will be destroyed. For every 3 units that enter Lille, you're going to get replacement points. These replacement points, unlike the others, can be held in reserve, so you can use them as you need them. The normal replacement points that you get per turn, you have to use them or lose them that turn. Okay, and those replacement points come per nationality, and they'll just replace eliminated units, so I got to keep my eliminated units in the tray so that I get a chance to bring them back into play. I haven't talked too much about the units. Cav just have a strength point value on them, and they only really can be in the foraging or coverage boxes. Infantry units, which I seem to have a big stack of in here, that may be... Yeah, Cav do weird things when they're in the covering boxes. Infantry units are going to be your main primary fighting forces, both in the covering boxes and, of course, in the assault itself. And they have 2 numbers, sort of a strength point number, but they're all the same, 400 for that. And then a morale value, which is important. All right. Attrition, you're going to make a roll on this little table on the turns where it's applicable and see how many units die. British don't take attrition, neat. Siege battery. So like I said, the limitation on firing isn't time in this game, it's ammunition supplies, which you get off this chart. When you want to fire a siege battery, you look at the bastion strength and you roll against the type of firing, and you figure out what kind of damage you do. Okay. The French fire back on the same table against parallels, saps, and gun galleries, which are these markers here. Saps, parallels, and the gun galleries. The gun galleries, the only thing that's special about them is they're built up enough that you can put the siege artillery in them to get them closer so they can fire. You have to worry about the range, and you have the modifiers on here to that die roll. So you got to get kind of close to be able to pound those walls effectively. Likewise, the French probably want to wait until the Allied forces get close enough that destroying the entrenchments actually is likely to happen. As you can see, here I need at least a 6 using siege batteries to do any damage. Now, and I need a 7 to actually wreck the entrenchment. Damaging a unit probably isn't that big a deal. Knocking out, I mean, it has an effect. So, I'm not going to get a 6 or a 7 unless I'm at least within 300 yards here, which is mortar range, and I'm not going to get any real damage unless I'm within 200 yards. Well, that's pretty damn close to, you know, my walls to be able to fire those. Beginning to remind you a little of minis, though. All right. Actual construction of the siege, the trenches, well, the Allies are gonna, it costs them a point to repair. So they generate points from here for how much build points they get. Like I said, 1/3 of the cav. I have 30 cav in here, I'm gonna get 10 points. These leaders, they're engineering leaders, on a die roll of 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 over for this guy, will get either 4 or 3 extra build points respectively. For each thing that I dig, and we got all kind of charts as to what's legal and what's not. You can see you're allowed a little bit of turning leeway, etc. I'm not going to go into all the details of that. But for each point that you spend, you put a thing and you put a little dude building it on the board, and that's going to cost you 2 build points. The exception to that is gun galleries, which cost 4, but you can upgrade the regular parallels into gun galleries for 2 and somebody working on it. And there's lots and lots of rules about how to do this, but none of them are really too exciting. We don't have to go into great detail there. At the same time, the French are going to have bastion repair points. Now, for them to do that, they need to have their engineering units in the damaged bastion, and they're able to repair 1 level of the bastion. But it looks like they can't repair something up beyond level 3. So once the wall's taken some damage, it's always going to be slightly damaged. We may not have enough markers to cover all of the areas, but I don't know. I'm not sure how much it's worth trying to bust down big sections of the wall down to breaches. Small sections. Okay. But you want to concentrate fire. There are also engineering officers here. For example, this guy, who adds a point if he's with an engineer. So you can repair something by 2 points. When the English first start building their parallels, etc., well, they have to build the first line, which is extending 18 parallels end to end from point A to B across here. And that's just a rule. They have to build their parallels along this line and then build out from them. Operational movement is pretty simple. You're basically, for the Allies, allowed to fly things around throughout your trenches as long as they're not going into damaged stuff. Damaged stuff they can only go into to repair. The French operational, I think they're allowed to pretty much move wherever they like as long as there are no Allies in there. So, for example, if the Allies took this entire bastion here, but not these stars, because they'd win if they took them, there would be no way to cross between these two. I'd say if the Allies have that whole bastion and didn't take a star, you're pretty close to the game ending anyway. Okay. For the assault phase, like I said, you kind of randomly determine how many Allied units you get. Tactical movement's going to be resolved with these. I don't remember what it is. It's 100 yards per movement. We do have terrain in the game. I think these are rough, where it's dark brown, and these are marsh. That doesn't affect your movement rate per se. What it affects, though, is how effective artillery fire is going to be against you as you're moving forward. So time's kind of being a little twisted here and abstracted during this. I don't want to go into too many details here because there are a lot of them, but it's mostly intuitive beyond that. Okay, when the French field batteries fire, I think they fire on the 2-to-1 table or something. Yeah, so they're going to be firing on the 2-to-1 melee result to get a letter. Now the letter, oh no, the attacker can be hurt here. Okay, so bad results. So the battery's not going to get hurt when it fires. But as long as you get at least a B, you're going to get a result. What is the result? Well, the result is you roll against your morale level to see what happens. And the effects, and this will be in melee too, and E is an elimination, and R means you're useless for the assault phase. French will be removed from the map, Allies will be put behind the start line, and they can't keep going. A 1 or a 2 is a retreat, and we got rules on that. A 1 is a 1 position, 1 bastion position. Retreat for the French. A 2 for the French is 2 bastion positions. If they can't retreat that far, they'll be eliminated. A 1 for the French is a retreat on a bastion position, or if you're in an assault position, you have to run back to the nearest parallel. Okay, that's something else. An Allied unit with a 2 is retreated, and if it didn't make it to a parallel, it's retreated again as though it took another 1. All right. And if you attack successfully, you're allowed to advance after combat into, you'll be advancing into a bastion position at this point. That's the only thing you can attack. But remember, the artillery get to use this on the 2-to-1 table as well. All right. Leaders get to modify attacks. We'll get into leaders in a little bit. All right. So the French is allowed to do sorties if he announces them. He declares if he wishes to sortie and which covering box he's hitting. The sortie will be done off map. Both players hide the units and order them into 2 rows. So these units would then be deployed. The Allies deploy 1 row first. If they have a leader, it's the strategic leader. He'll be placed behind. Any additional leaders are assigned to lead 2 infantry units by kind of, I don't know how to show you this, but kind of stacking on top of both of them. They'll be next to each other in line. Likewise, the French do the same. The screen will be removed. The French first line is put adjacent to the Allied line. For every 3 squadrons of cav or 2 squadrons of dragoon cav, the Allied player can screen off any French units in the second line. If there's no second line, or the Allied cav screens off the entire second line, then he can screen off first line units. If Allied infantry is not faced by French units or vice versa, they go back to the second line, i.e. if you have more units on one side than the other on the front. Then for each infantry unit in the front line, you roll 2 dice on the sortie table to see what happens to the unit across from it. I'm not seeing a sortie table. Oh, here. We got this here. Once the first line combat is completed, any infantry units in the second line can attack using a flanking section of the sortie table. That'll be this chart. This is the base chart, I guess. Where? I don't know. We'll figure it out if and when it happens. Yeah, this is what happens when I don't look at the charts, right? Opposing enemy unit, on a 2-to-4, you'll eliminate it, and you get these rolls. On flanking combat, you roll to eliminate at better chances based on the morale, and there are different modifiers to the 2 charts. Okay, like morale. Morale goes on the first chart, it doesn't go on the second. This is not something that maybe happens all that often, because early in the battle, the Allies have a lot of units in their covering boxes, and late in the battle, the French might not be able to afford. I mean, you can see they don't have any troops over here. Now, granted, I don't have any parallels near there. There's no danger of me running across the board here, because the French will be able to move, and I probably can't even make it in five impulses. So 5 impulses, I can only go 500. That's to here. If I don't have this much range to my assault location, I ain't gonna make it. Okay? All right. So, let's see. The question, of course, is, well, what happens if I'm got nothing in the sortie box? You know, why am I covering? And I'm not entirely sure of that. What happens if there is no ally in the allied unit in the sortie box? I'll have to get back to you if I can figure out any reason the Allies should actually cover their army. I'm going to do it, but I don't know if there's any rule that requires or gives me any reason to do it. I would almost say that the siege would be broken if you completely destroy a covering box. You basically sorted out and to great effect, and maybe you wrecked the headquarters or something. All right. What about leader effects? Okay. Leaders can be in the covering boxes where they'll have an effect on the die rolls there. The Allied leader is allowed to activate 5 battalions for each point of the highest leader behind the start line or siege work. Now, let's see, I've got the Duke of Marlborough here with his big +3 rating, but it's parenthesized, which means he can only, and that's essentially the same with the the Cav, he can only be played in these covering boxes. He can't be involved in the assault. The Dutch didn't trust him at this point. He had killed too many of them. And during the assault phase, the leaders can be stacked with infantry, and that'll be added on the melee combat results table on either side. The French, they can have them in the sortie box or use them on the board itself. The regular assault leaders, again, everything within 2 bastion positions of them gets a leadership bonus to the melee table. The artillery leader gets to subtract his rating. I don't know where I've got him. He's stacked over here. He's only got a 1. He gets to subtract his rating? Sounds like it should be add. From the die roll each time he fires. Now, if you look at this, you want that to be add, I believe, because this is for siege fire. It's always a bonus. And the French engineering officers, the E's, well, no, not the E's, those are the engineering units. The French engineering officers, like this guy, allow you to rebuild extra bastion positions. The French also gets 2 minors. At the end of, during operational movement, they can place them in any assault position they like. And they're just openly known that those areas are mined. If the Allies move on to those, the French can choose to explode them during tactical movement, and the unit that's in that space will cower. That's an effect I didn't speak about. When you take a melee result of cower, you roll again on the morale table, subtracting 1. If you get a second cower, in that case, you'll be eliminated, but otherwise you take the result as written. Okay. Leaders in melee have a chance of taking a leadership loss. A natural roll of 6 will injure them, and then you see how many turns they're removed from play. And a natural 12 for the strategic leader in a sortie can be injured, and he also will be out for a certain number of turns. You can't get anybody killed in this, though. People didn't tend to fight close up much. All right, so those are my minors, and these counters here. There's limited intelligence rules. So the sortie and covering and forge boxes, the French player knows how many units are there, but not precisely what they are. But he can probably look and see the color of the units. You can decide whether or not that's legitimate. I think it is. In the event that tactical fire goes through, that siege artillery fire can go through a parallel in this sort of way, that parallel is automatically destroyed through enfilade fire. So you don't want to build them like that if they're within 700 yards. And the victory conditions, well, for the Allies, it's to capture a star bastion. The French wins if he lasts the whole game. There is one other factor, though. The French will surrender if they have less than 10 infantry units on the walls. That's it. We'll give this a shot. I remember it being kind of more painful than Sevastopol, but it's such an innovative system that I really enjoy both of them. All right, up it goes.